Hi everyone, welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in this snowy Tuesday afternoon. It is continuing to come down fairly regularly here in Providence, and I have a national weather expert, Dr. Rick Knabb with the Weather Channel, former director of the National Hurricane Center, back to the Weather Channel, in studio with us today. Dr. Knabb, how are you?
I'm doing fine, and I've been keeping a close eye on your part of the country for a better part of a couple weeks now, and I know you're dealing with another potent storm today.
Yes, as they said, the third nor'easter in the last 11 days. Now here we are Tuesday afternoon. We have a winter storm watch in effect until 8 p.m. this evening. Let's talk about the last 24 hours. How has the storm progressed from what initial predictions had been?
Well, I think pretty close to what we expected. We didn't have a very strong low pressure system over the ocean 24 hours ago, but overnight and during the day today, it has rapidly strengthened as we generally anticipated would be the case. And we also anticipated that it would pass far enough offshore that New England would be almost completely within the snow rather than being partially on either side of the rain-snow line as with the previous two nor'easters. So, some of the places that didn't get much snow the last two times around have really gotten hammered this time.
On top of this a little bit, we were discussing before you came on the snow bands. We're seeing reports, especially just around here in Rhode Island, 8 inches Providence up to 16 other places. How do snow bands work?
Well, they're just areas in a larger scale low pressure circulation. I mean, this low pressure system is huge. I mean, it's hundreds of miles across. But within that circulation, you get areas where the effects of land contribute to what's going on in the atmosphere to create these little kind of street-like looking areas where the atmosphere is converging near the ground, and you get these upward motions, and that brings down the energy and causes the snow. But in between, you have the compensating effect where you get some sinking and less snow. And as the whole system moves on, those bands tend to move. So you get periods of really squally snow activity, and then it calms down, and then it ramps back up again. And some folks get more of that than others, and that's why you're seeing some folks get just a few inches and others getting more than a foot already.
Well, we're keeping an eye on it here in Providence. So any prediction, Doctor, when the snow is looking to stop?
Well, it's not going to completely stop today or even tomorrow morning. I think the heaviest snow would happen between now and midnight. Then you'll get continuing snow tomorrow morning. And then it'll be off and on Wednesday and Wednesday night. Not really until this whole system gets far enough north of you. By Thursday will the snow actually, for everybody in New England, be over. But it's going to be a cold, blustery period even Thursday and Friday.
So we're not out of the woods yet is basically what you're saying. Keep an eye on the forecast and knowing that it's not looking to stop anytime soon.
Yes, and it really is a good idea, as you've probably heard from most officials in the area, to not get on the roads. If at all possible, stay off the roads, because you have a combination of factors. The slick roads, obviously, depending upon what kind of road it is, how much snow, how much plowing has happened, but also with the strong winds, it makes the trees and the power lines very susceptible to being blown over, and that not only can cause the power outages, but also make it dangerous to be on the roads. In these winter storms, a lot of lives have been lost due to trees falling. You've seen the pictures of trees falling into homes. They can also fall onto cars. And also just be very safe during power outages by not running a generator indoors or just outside where the fumes, the carbon monoxide can get in your windows. And stay away from the downed power lines or any tree or area of water that they might be touching once things start to melt. So power outages can be dangerous too if you don't play it by the safety rules that we often preach about.
Be safe. I appreciate the reminder to our viewers here, Doctor. And we saw some reports down in Newport here in Rhode Island that they had blizzard level conditions. Taking a look at the tides, any concerns? Let's look here in Rhode Island for any flooding potential.
From this point forward, I'm not real concerned about that. The real problem area was the eastern facing shores of Massachusetts and portions of Cape Cod. And you all had in Rhode Island some water rise, some waves, but that is going to be on the decline because now you're going to have the offshore flows. The wind's going to be blowing from land to ocean, which will lessen the coastal flooding impact in your area. I wouldn't be too concerned about that, except I wouldn't be getting out on a boat because the ocean is going to be pretty angry for a while to come. And until this whole system gets out of here, the waves are still going to be very rough out there, very dangerous.
We did have that on GoLocal today that the Weather Channel did in fact call the ocean deadly. It is deadly conditions for people
Oh,
to be out
absolutely. There's
there.
no doubt about it. Yeah. And, whether you're at the coast or on a boat, when you have this magnitude of wind, the ocean can be, kind of sneaky. With the waves can come and go. And then when they get really high, that's when it gets very dangerous at the coast and to be out on a boat. And when conditions are that dangerous, it's very difficult for anybody to come rescue you out on the ocean.
Well, we included that. We've included all the forecasts from the Weather Channel, and I know you mentioned that the snow is not stopping anytime soon, but anything, Dr. Knapp, looming on the horizon that we need to be concerned about?
Well, I wish I could tell you with 100% certainty that there will not be a nor'easter next week, but I can't say that because our reliable models are at least hinting at the possibility of another low developing off the coast middle of next week. But whether or not it comes close enough to the coast as it moves northward to cause us another nor'easter or another round of wind and snow and rain and coastal effects. We don't know that. I mean, just think about 2 or 3 days ago, we weren't 100% sure what the effects from this one would be because a few days ago, some of the models suggested this one would stay far enough offshore. But it's still March. It's still the season for nor'easters. The season for nor'easters goes into April, really, historically. So it's not over, but maybe we'll catch a break next week.
Well, we will keep an eye, and we appreciate the Weather Channel's expertise being able to come right into the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center here and let folks know. So again, if you just tuned in, Dr. Rick Knapp said the snow is going to continue through this evening and possibly into parts of tomorrow as well. Stay off the roads. Dr. Knapp, I appreciate your taking the time to Skype in.
Hey, thanks for having us, and wish you everybody staying safe and warm.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Okay. Dr. Rick Knapp with the Weather Channel, the former head of the National Hurricane Center, back to his job at the Weather Channel. We appreciate getting his expertise. Hopefully we'll tap it throughout the year as well. But as he said, more snow to come. Please stay off the roads. Stay safe. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center with our next guest. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Would just like to thank the Weather Channel and Dr. Rick Knabb giving us an update on Winter Storm Skylar, expecting more snow throughout the evening and into tomorrow. So thank you again to them for Skyping in. I'd like to welcome on my usual Tuesday guest giving us inside the Beltway politics from a remote location today, Jennifer Lawless. Thank you for Skyping in.
My pleasure.
As we said, we usually tend to get big news after the Tuesday show, but we got some big news today, maybe not unexpected. The departure of Rex Tillerson. How has the reaction been to this?
Well, I don't think that the departure itself was unexpected, but the manner in which news was delivered, not only to the American public, but also to Rex Tillerson, was somewhat unexpected. So apparently John Kelly notified him last night that he was going to be replaced, although Tillerson did not think that it was going to be this morning. And he apparently found out via Donald Trump's tweet this morning that he was out. And so the interesting thing about this, and I think what a lot of people in D.C. are talking about right now, is for somebody who really loves firing people, this is yet one more example of Donald Trump not being willing to do the firing himself, face-to-face, in person. And so that's sort of counter to the way that he handled his reality TV show. The way he's handling his reality TV administration is a little bit more passive-aggressive.
That is a study in psychology for sure. You know, what had we seen for strife between Tillerson and Trump?
Well, we knew all along that Tillerson was probably a little bit more of an establishment Republican when it came to foreign policy. They differed regarding the Iran deal, but on top of that, yesterday, Tillerson came out and basically agreed with Theresa May about the fact that the Russians had something to do with poisoning the British spies, right? And so he made a negative statement regarding Russia, which Donald Trump does not seem to like. And so I think the timing of it was probably precipitated in part by that. Now, under ordinary circumstances, we might think that this isn't the worst thing in the world because Tillerson was unequivocally unqualified to be Secretary of State. But it turned out that he actually did seem to occupy one of the adult seats at the table. And being replaced with Pompeo is basically replacing somebody that countered Trump in a lot of ways with somebody who's a very fierce advocate of the president.
Do we think that the comments made were the sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, that perhaps the president had in his back of his mind that he had some hesitations and this is just what pushed him over the edge within the course of one day?
I think that's probably the case. From what I understand, nobody expected Donald Trump to tweet this information this morning. And so it may have been that he was just sitting on it and he couldn't stand it anymore. And the fact that Tillerson had the audacity to say something that wasn't completely consistent with Trump's views was just a little too much. Now, the White House is backing off of this. They're trying to argue that Tillerson himself resigned, that this was, you know, sort of a very amicable departure. And they're citing the fact that Tillerson has said that he's going to help enable the transition. That doesn't mean that it's an amicable departure. That just means that he doesn't want to completely compromise the security of the United States.
Let's talk about security. I was going to go to domestic politics, but I do want to kind of straddle the line here. Let's talk about the House Intelligence Committee talking about it's wrapping up its Russia investigation.
Yeah, this was another one where the Republicans decided that they found no collusion and they're wrapping up the Russia investigation. And Adam Schiff and the Democrats on the committee found out about this by reading about it in the newspaper. So a committee that was obviously pretty partisan and divided to begin with, there were no illusions of bipartisanship or working together, ended pretty much as dysfunctionally as it had operated. Now, Schiff, the ranking member, and the Democrats have said that they hope to continue the investigation. But obviously, when the Republican Party is in control, they're very limited, not only in their ability to call witnesses and to gather evidence, but to be able to put any pressure on people to comply with their requests. So for all intents and purposes, it's over on the House side.
Did we have a sense of timing? You know, were there sort of thoughts that maybe this could happen, or was this out of left field as well?
This seemed pretty much out of left field, although the Republicans had been suggesting for a couple of weeks now that Adam Schiff was taking his case to the American public by going on CNN almost every night. And so they were suggesting that he was colluding with the mainstream media. And as a result, the investigation couldn't carry on the way that it needed to carry on. But I mean, from the day after Devin Nunes went to the White House and basically reported everything that they had found, we knew that this was not going to be the committee that would ultimately be able to launch a legitimate investigation into the president.
So, along the lines of Tillerson's remarks to Theresa May, do we think that Schiff's sort of activist role perhaps pushed the Republicans over the edge?
It may have. I mean, I do think that what the House Republicans don't seem to realize is that the Senate's behaving a little bit more responsibly. And at the end of the day, it's ultimately going to be one committee plus the Mueller investigation that is likely to, if not take down the president, then certainly call into question the manner in which Russia interfered and what he knew about it. And so those committee, on the Senate side, we're seeing real deals being brokered and Democrats and Republicans behaving as co-partisans. And so I think there is where we would expect the real progress to be made.
Okay, let's go back over to the House side. Pennsylvania, 18th Congressional District.
Yeah, so this is a special election. The Democrats are well situated to pick up a seat, right? This is a Republican district. They have a Democratic candidate who, under ordinary circumstances, we might not really consider a Democratic candidate in Connor Lamb. If the Democrats win this seat, I think it will send shockwaves through the system because it means that there are solidly red rural areas where, with the right candidate, Republicans can be knocked off. If the Republicans hold the seat, I don't really think there's much news, except that, millions and millions of dollars were spent. But this is a situation where the Republicans really should be able to hold this seat.
And so what else are we keeping an eye on down in D.C. moving forward? What are we going to be talking about this time next Tuesday? And as we know, we often don't know.
Well, I think the Russia investigation and Paul Manafort in particular, a federal judge said today that Paul Manafort could very well spend the rest of his life in prison. If that's what a term looks like, then that also changes the calculus in terms of what Paul Manafort might be willing to tell people. Another piece of news that broke late today, where I think we'll see ripple effects, has to do with George Papadopoulos. In a new book, a new book suggests that he was very, very involved in trying to set up a meeting with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in particular, the two of them. And so my bet is that we'll start hearing a little bit more from Mueller. The last week or so, we haven't heard that much from that side.
And the Papadopoulos book, did we know of this piece of information, or did we know this book was coming?
I didn't know the book was coming. I don't know what we knew. I didn't know the book was coming. I think all of these pieces of information are not necessarily new to the Mueller team or to other key investigators. But I do think that as a result of these little snippets being leaked out, more and more about the Mueller investigation is brought to the fore as well. And so assuming that Mueller knew about this, that's yet one more reason that Papadopoulos might have agreed to cooperate with the investigators early on.
Well, appreciate being able to catch you with the news cycle instead of waiting for the next weeks to get it. Again, Tillerson and everything that's taking place inside the Beltway. Jennifer Lawless, we appreciate your taking the time to Skype in.
I'll see you next week.
Okay, take care. Be safe. Jennifer Lawless, professor at American University, head of the Women in Politics Institute, Skyping in to give us the latest of DC politics. Of course, Rex Tillerson being out, the reaction to that, the special Pennsylvania congressional race today, implications there, and more. So just want to say thank you to Jennifer for Skyping in, as always. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with our third and final guest here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center, going national, Dr. Terrence Rohrig at the Naval War College, expert in the Korean Peninsula. Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for joining us for the 4 o'clock news and politics show this snowy Tuesday afternoon. We've had Skypes in from the governor, from Cranston, Mayor Alan Fung, lots on GoLocal, but we're talking politics now, and we've got a familiar face. He's been in studio with us before. Dr. Terrence Roerig with the Naval War College, expert on the Korean Peninsula. Dr. Roerig, how are you today?
Hi, Kate. I'm doing well, thanks, other than having to shovel snow.
Other than having to shovel snow, plenty of time to tell us your thoughts and perspectives on the current state of U.S.-Korean North and South relations. Let's start with the news today that Rex Tillerson is out.
Well, I suppose looking at the entire week or so that we have seen, my one word to describe it all is wow. There have been an awful lot of things happening these last few days, beginning first with the very strong North-South talks that will be coming up at the end of April, then the possibility of U.S.-North Korea talks, and now with Secretary Tillerson, which puts a different hand perhaps on the tiller, if you will, for the possible U.S. dialogue with North Korea, but a lot of questions about that still remaining.
Do we just not have any indications now how Pompeo might handle this versus a Tillerson? Do you think we had a good beat on how Tillerson represented the Trump administration? Now we have a little more of an X factor.
Well, I think what you see is Pompeo being much more in line with the president's policies on a lot of different things. And likely the most important reason that he was put in place of Secretary Tillerson. And so I think you are likely to see perhaps a bit more hawkish of a position from Pompeo with Trump. And we shall see how that plays out in regards to what the United States expects and how we set up the arrangements for this potential summit that's coming sometime in May.
And we did talk before you came on, and you just mentioned it as well. Of course, us here in the U.S. are looking towards that Trump-Kim Jong-un meeting. But as you mentioned, the North-South meeting probably holds even greater importance before there's even a possibility of Trump with Kim Jong-un.
I think so, and I think we have to make sure that, of course, because in the United States we're very interested in the U.S. dimension to this, we should not set aside the really important element of North-South dialogue starting up again. And this is going to happen. The U.S.-North Korea talks, there are still some issues and questions about whether this is going to actually happen or not. The North-South one is much more likely to happen, and in many respects, North-South relations is where this needs to start to begin to improve relations and lower tension levels on the Korean Peninsula. But I would add, for both of these elements of talks, we need to manage our expectations. Don't get your hopes up too high that this is suddenly going to lead to some major breakthrough. We have a long, long process ahead if we can ever get to denuclearization.
And talk with us a little bit about the North-South talks and a little bit about the U.S.-North talks as well. What would you attribute? Is this a thawing, or is this the result of, protracted negotiations to just get to this point?
Sure. I mean, I think you could certainly possibly look at this as a change in the North Korean position, but I don't think that's the case. I think the North Korean position is not going to change. I think what you are seeing is sanctions are having an impact and have pushed the North Koreans to the table. I think the North Koreans also believe that this is a chance to drive a wedge perhaps between the United States and South Korea. And lastly, I think it is an effort by them to generate a more positive international image that they are in fact now willing to sit down at the table, to dialogue, to talk about these issues. But I think fundamentally North Korea is not going to be willing to give up its nuclear weapons. And we're going to have to figure out where we can come to some agreement, perhaps short of that.
And so talk a little bit about the sanctions and what, in your opinion, has specifically hit North Korea the hardest. How was the sort of the knife wedged in there to make them get to this point?
Well, I think in a couple of different ways, we have hit some of the key exports that North Korea has, as well as imports. textiles and other things that the North Koreans export, some of the imports for energy, oil, and such that come into North Korea from China. Also, North Korea's coal and iron ore exports have been curtailed as well. Those things are really important elements that get at North Korea's ability to generate hard currency that can keep the economy afloat. So I think those things have been essential. I think another element over the past year has been an apparent Chinese willingness to enforce these sanctions a bit more than they had been in the past. So it's interesting, in about a year ago, the South Korean National Bank, which produces estimates of the North Korean economy, put out a statistic that in 2016, the North Korean economy grew by 3.9%.
Okay.
That's pretty impressive. Now, that's 2016. It will be very interesting to see in 2017 what numbers show up for the North Korean economy. And I have a feeling it's going to be less than that, and that the sanctions have been part of what have pushed the North Koreans to the table.
Do we have a sense of time frame, Doctor, when those numbers will come out from the bank?
Last year they came out in April, so we'll see.
Getting close. And you just mentioned the next question that was on the tip of my tongue, the role of China. Why do we think China finally got to the point of enforcing those sanctions?
I think China has been frustrated with North Korea's behavior. I think ultimately China does not want to see the North Korean regime collapse. They do not want to see a reunified Korean peninsula for a number of different reasons. A divided Korea is an important strategic interest for China. But with that said, when North Korea tests nuclear weapons, tests ballistic missiles, those things stir up the security environment in the region that are not in China's interest. It gets South Korea talking about nuclear weapons. It gets the possibility of the United States talking about military strikes, more South Korean, Japanese, U.S. cooperation. All of those things destabilize the regime or destabilize the security environment from China's perspective. And I think ultimately they don't want to see that happen. And so their frustration has been building. And so while I don't think they will turn the sanctions tight enough to endanger a collapse of the North Korean regime, over the past year they have been willing, apparently, to tighten the screws a bit more than they had been before. But there are still some question marks about Chinese enforcement.
And if you're a betting man, Doctor, do you foresee this meeting taking place? Are we giving it a 50-50? Are the odds a little bit more because of the indications that it's set to take place? Well, you know, what's the Vegas odds on the Trump-Kim Jong-un meeting?
Wow. I'm going to say at this particular point, I think it is 50-50.
Okay.
Even though we have made a commitment to this, I think there are some details that need to be worked out yet. And I think that there is potential room to back out. I would also add that there is another element to this. All of the discussion about the meetings have come through South Korean representatives who met with North Korea. There's been nothing on paper that the North Koreans have given to the United States about this. Now, that's not to doubt that the South Koreans are telling us what the North told them, but it's still, because the North Koreans have not officially, formally committed, announced, said anything about these meetings, there is some question mark that perhaps the North Koreans still have some room to back out if this doesn't get set up the way they would like to see this set up.
And what does a setup look like in a parameter between two very enigmatic, some could say volatile individuals? I mean, who lays out the groundwork? Who says these are the rules of engagement? And what do those even look like?
Sure. I think typically when you look at meetings of this nature and of this import, you typically have a lot of lower level officials meeting for weeks, months, talking about issues, talking about the agenda, what are the kinds of things that can be agreed upon. And the summit meeting comes after much of that has been agreed. And this is to sort of put the final signature on what may have already been in the works at lower levels. This particular meeting, we're starting backwards, and we may be starting with the summit meeting. And given the progress we've made so far, maybe that's not a bad thing, but there certainly are risks. I think the other big concern is that a lot of the U.S. Korea expertise is not there at this particular time. In particular, we have not had a U.S. ambassador to South Korea since the administration's been in office, and Joseph Yun, who has been the main point person for negotiations with North Korea, recently resigned his post, and that's unfilled as well. So that, as well as some other lower level positions that have not been filled, that's a concern in regards to the planning going forward. But we shall see. I tend to view the fact that we are having dialogue a good thing. It is much better than where we were in the summer and in the fall when there was discussion about starting a war in the Korean Peninsula. I think military options are a disaster.
And talk with us finally, have there been talks about where physically this meeting would take place?
Yes, that's another interesting element to this. Some have talked about possibly that the invitation was that Kim Jong-un would be willing to come to Washington, D.C. I doubt that. And I think Kim Jong-un is unlikely to be willing to go abroad at all. He has not done that yet. There are issues where there are human rights groups that say he should be hauled in for what his regime does. So you leave the country, that comes into play. Also, if you leave, now others in your domestic political environment can make mischief potentially if the leader's gone. For all those reasons, I think it's unlikely Kim Jong-un is going to leave the country. I also don't think Trump is going to go to Pyongyang because of the optics of that. Some have suggested maybe Vladivostok is close, but again, I think that's unlikely. Beijing, maybe. I think what you're left with is the same venue where North and South Korea are going to meet, and that is at Panmunjom, which is right on the border. And I think that will be the relative neutral site. Some have also suggested Geneva, Switzerland. But again, I just find it unlikely that Kim Jong-un is going to leave very far from home.
Well, I appreciate your taking the time to Skype in on this snowy day to give us some perspective on the latest with Korean relations with the U.S. We've picked your brain in the past, both everything that's taken place this week. Professor, I appreciate your taking the time to Skype in.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kate.
Dr. Terry Rohrig at the Naval War College. We have talked before. Appreciate his taking the time to Skype in today here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. We'll be providing more weather updates throughout the evening. We did get in touch with the Weather Channel. Dr. Nab there at the beginning of the show told us more snow is expected. It is coming down here in Providence. We'll have more weather updates, and we'll be back in the Navigant the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center tomorrow. We'll see you then. Thanks, everyone. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel.